Asian Women Festival, we love talking, and between us, we have a lot of opinions, anecdotes, and believe it or not, some wisdom. So whether it's about world issues or matters of the heart, we don't leave any stone unturned, and we wanted to let our wonderful community in on our candid conversations, which is why we decided to start Getting Real with AWF, where you can take a sneak peek into our discussions. So today, with the recent events surrounding the Black Lives Matter movement, sparked by the senseless murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, among others, we wanted to have our first discussion about how we approach this topic with our South Asian families. Now, from speaking to a lot of people about their personal experiences and the response we've seen from our community on social media, we know there is a real desire and need to educate our South Asian families on what it means to be anti-racist, especially as our position as South Asians can be a tricky one to navigate. So, for example, traversing between supporting Black lives without clouding the discussion with our own issues about colorism and our own discrimination. So we've also called time on anti-Blackness within our own community, but knowing where to start with these discussions can be tough and sometimes uncomfortable. So it's a lot to cover, but we've got a great set of people here for this chat. So I'll stop talking now and let you guys introduce yourself. So first up, hi, I'm Kim and I'm the content manager at Asian Women Festival. Alina, do you want to go?
Yep, sure. Hi, I'm Alina. I'm our social media manager for AWF. And I actually am from the United States. I'm in Washington, D.C., so it's been a central hub of a lot of the conversations and honestly chaos. But I previously lived in London, so it's been really interesting to kind of see the differences in terms of how we talk about racism and how we go about bringing real action to change the systemic racism in both the UK and the US.
Cool, thanks. Maleha?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Miles or Maleha, you can pick whichever one. I'm the assistant coordinator for AWF.
And we have two guests with us today. So Jackie, do you want to go first? I can see you excited.
Hi, I'm Jackie, also known as Jackie Big Tits. I have because I've got big tits. You can't see them though today. But I have a podcast called Jackie Big Tits where I tackle taboo topics, everything from like relationships to family to finances to self-love. I also write for the Metro. I have a column in the Metro where I talk about basically being proud of who you are. So I've talked about like racism. I did an article talking about why our white friends need to stand up for us now and what they're going to do, what are they going to do now, knowing what they know now. I've talked about body image, self-acceptance, being called too much, single shaming, and I've also featured on Women's Hour, BBC Radio 1 Extra Talks, and BBC 5 Live and BBC London, and I've also featured in BBC 3 Things Not to Say to Black Women. And at the moment I've been doing loads of panel talks and discussions, and I even did a podcast with my best friend where we talked about racism, where she actually had admitted that she used to refuse to say that I was Black, so that was a really interesting conversation. So yeah that's me.
Thank you, we're excited to have you. Pratyusha?
Hi, I'm Pratyusha. I'm an upcoming third-year undergraduate at UC Riverside, which is here in California. And I'm also the vice president of the organization South Asian Federation at UCR, which aims to provide like a cultural, social, political, safe space for the Asian community, South Asian community on our campus. And I'm also part of the group of friends behind the website resource South Asians for Black Lives Matter, where we compiled our experiences with facilitating intergenerational conversation and sparking action from the South Asian community in support of the Black community. And we're also proud to announce that the United States Library of Congress has selected our website for inclusion in the library's historical collection of internet materials related to Indian political and social issues. So it's awesome that they recognize the need for this resource, and the fact that it'll be publicly available is just a step in the right direction towards dismantling anti-Blackness. And I'm also the co-founder of Balling Moms, which is a community organization that aims to provide mothers with leisure time for themselves through fitness classes and Bollywood dance and cardio, because I mean, statistically, South Asian mothers don't prioritize their mental or physical well-being before their families. And as the homemakers and the superheroes that they are that keep this world going, we wanted to create kind of an environment for them, just for moms to dance, to exercise, to have fun, and do some things for themselves because they so deserve it.
Cool. And Pratyusha, would you also mention as well that you are also a volunteer for South Asians for Black Lives, which is this amazing platform that's just, I think we said it earlier, that's just ballooned in this last few weeks because of the great resources you're putting out there. So thank you guys for joining us today. So let's get stuck in. So I want to start with you, Jackie, because I know that like in the past, a lot of responsibility for like the inequality faced by Black people has fallen on Black people themselves to remedy this. And I know like discussions like this can be like exhausting. You said you've been busy over the last few weeks, like talking about these things.
Yeah.
But why is it so important that other races be involved? And also with that as well, why do you think it's more than just a white issue? Like, why are we here today, like as South Asians, having to talk about it as well? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that, to be honest, if I start from the root, I don't think we would even be having this conversation if coronavirus wasn't happening. Because I feel like coronavirus is in the background, and I've in my head, I've seen it as God has sent us to our rooms to look at what we've done. And I feel like at the moment, because we've got this time to reflect and think, because we haven't been able to have our freedom how we've usually been able to have it.
Yeah.
That people have really had that time to look inwards, because you know, hashtag Black Lives Matter has been trending for a very long time. In fact, it was trending under Obama's administration, you know, and some ignorant people might have said, oh well, you know, America couldn't possibly be racist because Barack Obama's president. It's like, oh, Black people were still being killed under his presidency.
Yeah.
So now I feel like, because people have had time to reflect and think, because they were able to also see an 8-minute video of someone being brutally murdered. You know, whether you thought George Floyd was a criminal or not, he didn't deserve to die. And he definitely didn't deserve to die like that. That I feel like now things have changed. I definitely feel okay. I think I've had moments where I felt quite exhausted and quite tired. And I've had a lot of apologies from a lot of my, you know, white friends, and even a lot of my Asian friends saying, you know, I'm really sorry for that time when I should have stepped in when this happened. And it's a bit like, it's a bit too late for that, hun. You know, for me, I'm more like, now you know it's bad. What are you going to do? Are you going to go into your office and look at your office and look and think, okay, why are there no Black people in here? Are you gonna invest in Black businesses? Are you going to challenge your racist uncle? You know, because it's all good and well posting. I can post things I don't understand or care about.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what I'm interested in. But it's been a really interesting time, and also the fact that, you know, like Rennie Lodge's book, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, came out in 2017.
Yeah.
2020, and now it's like Sunday Times, New York bestseller.
It's
And
really
it was
convenient, isn't it?
right. So it's like, this is interesting. But one thing I'm grateful is the fact that we are able to even have this conversation, because in the past I've had conversations about race and people, you know, they don't want to hear about it. Oh, can we talk about something upbeat? Or, you know, so you've even had to like dim your own trauma to make other white people feel comfortable. But why I think it's important, you know, for you know, South Asians should be having this kind of conversation is because I feel like, if I can speak from one of my good friends' perspective, she has told me that, you know, there's anti-Blackness within your community. And I think that acknowledging the full liberation of like Black communities leads to the freedom of all people. And also I think that, you know, white supremacy benefits only white people. So it's not actually just a Black people problem, it's a global problem, because we are still, as long as you are not white, you are not benefiting from the system.
Yeah,
it's really that simple. And I think that, you know, if people who are not Black continue to perpetuate anti-Blackness, that makes you complicit in reinforcing those systems of oppression that also harm your own people in your own community. And I think that Black liberation has also, and the struggle has paved way for families to immigrate and enjoy benefits, not just here, but in the United States. I think that this is a global issue. I think before it was a Black person issue. It's like, oh, you know, you've got to deal with it. You've got to educate people. But now people are realizing, oh, crap, I don't benefit from this system either. The only people that benefit from this system are white people.
Yeah.
you know. However, that doesn't take away your own struggles, you know. I think that's why it's difficult, because it's trying to, you want to obviously talk about your own struggles, but you don't want to cloud other Black people's experiences of trauma. And that's what's really interesting, because obviously you talk about racism and people go, oh, well, what about this person, and what about this community, and what about, and you know, it's like at the moment it's what we're focusing on. However, if we can actually get through this, then it can actually pave the way for other communities to also have their freedom as well.
Yeah, and that's also the reason why I asked, why do you think it's more than just a white issue as well? Because I think a lot of like the discourse recently has been, oh, well, you know, we're brown as well, and we also have like racism thrown our way and stuff like that. But I think this issue goes way broader than that. It's a systemic thing. Like, we're all having to face it now. And I don't know if you guys, Maleha and Alina, I know we've spoken about it like offline as well. Like, what have your experiences been with explaining, like, you know, the recent events and explaining what being anti-racist is to your South Asian family? Like, how have those discussions gone down?
I think before I delve into that, I want to say, Jackie, like, thank you for joining this call, because you know, like you said, it's emotionally taxing, and you don't necessarily should be here educating everyone. Like, this is not your issue per se. Like, it's up to us, you know, using our privilege to take this on now. But like, genuinely, like, thank you. And I think everyone from AWF is really grateful that you're here. And like, you know, at any point, if it's too much, just say, like, you know, we'll cut it short. Like, there is racial trauma, and it can be triggering, and you don't necessarily have to sit here and tell us, you know, how to do things, but we genuinely really appreciate this.
Oh, pleasure.
Yeah, we hope it's a lovely chat. But to answer your question about how my experiences have been, I mean, there's been so many different times I've tried to talk to my family members. In one particular occasion is, you know, when everything was happening in the news with George Floyd, I took it upon our family group chat. So it's like all my cousins that are around the same like age group as me. And I thought, you know, it's easier to tackle them because we've grown up in the same environment than getting to my aunties and uncles. That's a different process because they've grown up with a different way. So I used to, on a daily basis, send like resources and books and podcasts and just like you know, like little Instagram captions that they could read, and I was just getting ignored on a daily basis, like just getting ghosted, and or just being ridiculed. So they're laughing at what I'm saying, or just sending memes, and I was still like, no, I've got to continue doing it, because even though it's uncomfortable for me, I have to sit through the uncomfortableness. I think at one point I couldn't do it anymore. I was like, they're not listening, they're actually laughing. And then I had a cousin that said, but you know, what about what happens to Asians, and but you know, what about black on black violence? And I lost it. And this is where it's important for you to actually know the stats and know the data. And I came to him, I was like, you know what, here's the statistics, bro. There is no such thing as black on black violence. It's just like, you know, it's a manipulation through media to perpetuate, again, criminalization. And I think it just had an impact on one person, but it's been really difficult. It's been quite challenging to understand why. For them, they don't really want to. I don't think they want to get their heads around it, because, like we said earlier, it's like, well, what about us? We've also been victims. But you know, if we don't get to the root of it, it's not going to dismantle everything else. So it hasn't always been the best experience. My mum, on the other hand, bless her heart, she's a religious woman, and she says, she's like, you know, I don't get it. We're all created equal under God. I don't understand why there's variations of, you know, why you need to be racist to people, because we're all equal. And I'm like, yeah, mum, thank you. You know, it's an innocent statement. There are flaws in what she's saying, because she doesn't really understand the systemic problem. But for her to understand in her ways, in way she was brought up, you know, she's an immigrant, it still brought something to my heart. I'm like, okay, she can understand then. So yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Why do you think there is anti-Blackness within the South Asian community? Like, what is the reason for it? Just because I feel like, obviously, I mean, we are all minorities.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm just trying to understand, like, what do your family say about Black people? What's the kind of stigma around?
I think my understanding, and feel free to chip in, I think historically, our interactions with British colonialism, and this idea to be as close to whiteness as possible, that was so drilled in. And then there's a sense that, oh, I might be better than a black person in this hierarchy. I'm going to be afforded more benefits.
Wow.
Then why wouldn't I try to achieve more, to be more white than black? I think that's where it's, I think, possibly rooted under. I don't know, Alina, or Kim, or Pratusha, if you have anything else to add on that.
I agree. I think like it's this protectionism of like white people, like even though they came and like came into like our country, like India, for example, which is where my family's from, they colonized those countries, right? And they faced like lots of trauma. But at the end of the day, you see like older generations defending that behavior. And like, it's like, I don't know, like what, Stockholm syndrome? Like the education they're given is like, colonialism was good. This was good for you. And like, I even hear like, people being like, you know, it's really great that you know, India was colonized. Otherwise, how else would we have had stuff like the railways? And you're like, do you really think that Indians wouldn't have been able to figure that out by themselves if like British people went over there? Like, it's crazy. Alina, sorry, you were about to say something.
I think it's definitely that. And I think, you know, my parents are from Pakistan, and a lot of my family is from Pakistan and still is there. So to also answer your question, Kim, I think, you know, it's the lack of education and the lack of awareness. They're not, you know, meeting Black people day to day, and they're, you know, at work or in school. So they're not getting those positive experiences that we typically do get because we're immersed in that community and have, you know, friends, family, even now relationships. So a lack of having those personal experiences and just seeing the slander in the media of how this Black person robbed, you know, this store, or, you know, even George Floyd, and like how that was the right thing to do for the police officer because it was a forged, you know, check. They're getting these really, you know, constantly these poor examples of how Black people are bad people when that's not necessarily true. And they're not getting those positive experiences in their daily lives to kind of combat that. So all that they're getting are those, you know, misconceptions. And that's a generational issue, I would say. That's not anything that is new to, you know, my parents or even their parents. This has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years. And then the lack of, you know, those experiences and that education obviously continues that cycle. So when I'm talking, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you went to a Black Lives Matter march and you took your parents, and your mom made her own sign. Like, how did the conversation?
My mom took me, and I'm proud to say that. And she created her own sign, which was, you know, if it's hard to breathe with a mask, think about how hard it is to breathe being Black in America. And I loved that she took the initiative. She sought out that, you know, it was a very local and small protest, but I love that she, you know, took me, and that was a part of our journey. And so for her, what works and what I found has worked with some of my family back home in Pakistan is going with the hard facts, going with, you know, you think that Black people don't try in school or aren't educated. Here are the facts in terms of how many Black people are educated, how many Black people are actually doctors, lawyers, engineers, etc. Because I was astonished to know that they don't even know. They don't even know how many positive examples there are of the Black community helping the broader community. And I think it's our job to really educate them that the Black community is as good as any other community, and here's why. So the conversations that I've been having with my mom and other people within our family is rooted in statistics. It's rooted in positive experiences. It's rooted in terms of systemic racism and how the system is there to really hurt them and not help them. And by bringing kind of those stories to light, it's really helped them re-educate themselves in terms of, you know, the Black community.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like, you talked a little bit about like generational thing there, and I think it's one of the biggest barriers because, you know, when parents, aunties, uncles, and even like Maleha, like you said as well, cousins as well, don't have the same social feeds. I'm really, I fall into this thing where I'm in a bubble, And I think that everyone's social feed looks like mine. Like everyone's being hit by all these posts that came out, you know, to do with like Black Lives Matter. But Pratyusha, maybe you can help answer this question. How do we communicate these issues to our community when everyone's feeds don't look like the people on this call's feeds?
I think I just want to preface by saying that it's even a privilege that we have to be talking about this over Zoom at our dining tables rather than actually having to face Black systemic racism. And we have to use that privilege in a way that will help change our communities for the better. And I think going back to Jackie, like asking why there is anti-Blackness in the South Asian community, I mean, ultimately, I think it does come from colorism, you know? Like living in white America, I did not learn anything about Black history in school growing up. We only learned about like Columbus, we only learned about history of white America and colonialism. And so our parents were very shocked to hear that. They didn't know that we didn't have Black history. We didn't know anything about Black history growing up. And it goes back like the fact of colorism. You know, we came here with my parents, my Indian parents immigrated here due to the Immigration Act of 1965. We came here with the model minority myth, knowing that we're successful and we associate material wealth with success. And in a way to come here and see that we're brown and we fit kind of in this spectrum of like white to Black, and we're brown, like we're in the middle, we're like higher to the white side than to the Black side. So which is kind of goes back to why we discriminate on the Black community. And another thing that Alina was also saying, how we don't have positive experiences. In our conversation that we had with our community over Zoom, we had a couple like potential questions that we knew were going to come up. And one of the questions that came up was, in my experiences, Black people have been XYZ. And a lot of people had these defensive arguments with us, but like going back to the statistics, and I think going back to a common point of understanding, making sure that you put yourself in their shoes and making sure that it doesn't come from a place of debt, that they feel obligated that, oh, like, I didn't realize I made this many mistakes, like now I need to fix it, because this shouldn't come out of a place of debt. This is not like a political issue. This is like a human rights issue. And getting our parents to realize that is important. And going back to the media bias, as we were researching, we came across this one Cosmopolitan article, and one of the Black activists in the Cosmopolitan article was saying how we have media bias because of the media that we're consuming. And if you just do something simple, like change your web setting to private, it filters all of like the prejudice and like all of the opinionated articles that you could get. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And also making sure that we're consuming different types of media, being open to many different kinds. So we're not also putting our own bias and our own prejudice in the way we're listening to things. And I think just like sharing easy infographics, easy to read articles, like as you were saying, Ma, like kind of sparking those conversations within your families, within your communities, bringing information from a variety of sources, and making sure that we're amplifying Black voices in the process, because we have to center this, like colorism and racism are important, but we should make sure that we're not conflating these issues with systemic racism, because Fair and Lovely is problematic, but it can wait. Like Black lives are the issue right now.
Yeah, definitely. So actually getting to the nitty gritty of it, how do we have these conversations? Like what techniques should we be using? Because I know like Maleha, we've discussed it as well, like things can get ugly when we're having these conversations with people that we think we know or that we love, and we're having like these uncomfortable conversations. How do we actually convey to them what we want to convey without it being like a back and forth argument? Anyone speak up?
I think, and what I've learned through this process is that it has to start with like compassion and patience. Like it's not going to happen overnight, and it shouldn't happen overnight, because unlearning takes a long time. And we need to kind of understand, especially for the older generation, that it's going to be multiple conversations. It's going to be multiple weeks. It's going to be multiple, like you said, Pratyusha, like different resources, different avenues to really help them. So for me, whenever I start a conversation, I check, am I okay to start this conversation? Like, do I have the mental capacity to sit here for an hour and be emotionally invested and have the right resources top of my mind to walk with someone? And also, you know, are they willing to like change? Are they willing to listen to me? If they're just sitting there ignoring me, I'm gonna actually move on to someone who is willing to learn and unlearn, because, you know, it's also about protecting our energy, and also not getting frustrated and really having the best impact where it can actually be impactful.
Yeah, I've actually been having this like fear that like you have to like approach these people, and people that are already open maybe will start to read the books and whatever. But like there was all these reading lists going around about like, for example, read Why I'm No Longer Speaking to White People About Race. And I'm like, someone who is like in the Daily Mail comment section is not going to be open to reading that book. Like we can put out all the reading lists as we want, but like how do we reach those people? That's like a big fear of mine. But then I'm thinking these people are amongst us, so it's all about conversation. How have you been approaching those kind of conversations? Anyone? Have you had those conversations with people that are like on the complete other side, and not these people that are like willing to have a discussion like we are now?
Do you know what? Actually, listening to this is actually quite hard. And I underestimated, I'm just being frank, I underestimated how difficult it is to actually hear that, you know, people have hatred for all Black people. Mainly because Black people are not given individuality. So people tend to assume all Black people are the same, you know? And that's difficult because we are all our own, just like white people, we are all our own people. White people are given individuality. For example, if someone commits a crime, maybe you can actually vouch for me here too. You know, if someone commits a crime on TV, and maybe they're, for example, they're Indian, do you feel, if you see that the criminal is Indian, do you feel a kind of way, like, why you gotta be Indian for?
Yeah, I feel, I'm like embarrassed. I'm like, why is it gonna be Indian? Like,
why you gotta be, so same with, and because we have a strong sense of collective identity, we almost feel like people are gonna hold us responsible for this person who I share the same skin color with, don't know from a bar of soap, but because I know that people are then going to associate Black people as criminals or as this thing. Whereas as a white person could be a paedophile on TV. A white person watching that can crack on with their life. They have no connection to that person. And actually, it's so difficult when I hear things like this, because I'm like, you know, when hearing people say, you know, Black people are X, Y, Z, it's like, oh my gosh, like we're all so different. And actually, when we talk about media bias, I get so annoyed because what is perpetuated in the media, especially about Black women, is these stupid stereotypes. We're not angry, we're sassy, we're sex vixens, and there's nothing else. Literally, there's nothing else. You're always the sassy Black friend of the white protagonist. You know what I mean? And it's like,
so true.
Do you not think like Black people can be vulnerable? Like Phoebe Waller-Bridge in Fleabag? Do you know what I mean? Do you not think we can be like this too? And it's so annoying, but I don't blame people for having unconscious bias, because we live in a world where, especially in this country, where everything is to benefit white people. So it's a privilege for a white person to be able to turn on their TV and know that they're going to be represented. It's a privilege for them to open a magazine and know they're going to see someone that looks like them. You know, it's like, that's all, if that's all you've ever seen, you think it's like normal for everybody. Like all my friends were so shocked that like I have to Google what countries are not which are at least racist so that I can go. They're like, what? I can't believe you have to do that. I'm like, oh, well, it's a privilege that you don't even need to do that.
Or even think about it.
Even think about it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just didn't realize how difficult it would be for me to hear this. Obviously, I'm happy to be on this conversation, but I just didn't realize, because it's so hard when I feel like we always have to prove ourselves. You know, I always have to feel like I've got to prove that I'm not this non-threatening Black girl.
Yeah.
That like I'm not this, you know, this sassy woman or this angry woman, or sometimes even dim your Blackness to make other people feel comfortable. You spend your whole life doing that, trying to prove that you are your own person. I am not the stereotype, you know? And so, so just hearing you say that really did make me think about that. But like, yeah, I'm like, fine. Don't worry.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think also when it's a positive, when there's an exception, like, oh, look at that Black person who does podcasts, or she's sensitive, or, you know, she's a doctor. Why does that have to be a thing? You're just a person that exists, and that's enough for me to treat you with respect. You don't have to go above and beyond for you to be this exception to the community. Like, let's be nice to this person, let's give this person respect because they're contributing to society. You know, there's so many issues in that, even this whole aspect of positive examples, you know, you're afforded respect based on the fact that you exist. That's
exactly. And you don't need to be excellent to be accepted. You know, like I said about George Floyd, whether he was a criminal or not, he didn't deserve to die like that. Even that guy in America, I forgot, Christian Cooper, that had that Amy Cooper, that woman that was saying, "Oh, I'm gonna call the police on you." Say there's an African American man, you know, and people were shocked. How could they do that to him? He does bird watching. Why do you have to be excellent to prove whether you're worth living? That's ridiculous. Whether even if he wasn't a bird watcher, he still doesn't deserve to be treated like that. And I think it's so annoying as a black person. You feel that you know, I'm sure maybe you heard when you were growing up, you have to work 10 times harder than everyone else. But I don't know if you were told that growing up, but that was instilled in me constantly. You have to work 10 times harder. Everyone has to be excellent. Why do we have to be brilliant to live? Like white people just live. Why can't we do that?
It's this myth of meritocracy, isn't it?
Right.
If white people are able to work hard and get where they want to, they don't have barriers. They think everyone should be able to just work hard and it will pay off.
Right.
That
would be great in a fair, equal world. But unfortunately, we don't live in one. But then, I suppose, as a white person, you think it's fairly fair because it's fair to you. So,
it's so like frustrating about like the anti-Blackness and having to explain all these events to the South Asian community is because we don't have the same stereotypes, but we have our own stereotypes.
Right.
And we have been told, you know, you do have to work twice as hard. So we understand all that, but still, there's still this anti-Blackness. Is still there, and that actually like it baffles me that we have to convince people when we have so much experience ourselves of the stereotyping and of like being portrayed a certain way in the media.
Right. What kind of stereotypes do you have?
Well, we have like the good ones, which is the fact that, you know, we'll
you're like smart and
we'll have businesses and we'll whatever, but also like the ones about like Asian women all having arranged marriages, and that's our goals in life.
Submissive and
to be not having
and there's also links to, you know, religion as well. Some of our communities, you know, Islamophobia plays a really big part into it as well. Right. That impacts sort of where I come from as well. So
have you all, sounds like a stupid question, but I'll ask anyway, have you all experienced racism?
Yeah.
Particularly after 9/11, for me, being, you know, brown skin, Muslim.
So I live in the Bay Area, the Silicon Valley, which is predominantly South Asian, and to live in an area that is predominantly South Asian and still experience racism is very interesting, because talking to our families about this, we really had to come from a lens of like being empathetic and putting ourselves in their shoes, relating it to their humanity, because we're not changing like their ideas, we're changing their beliefs, like their ingrained holistic beliefs, right? And you were saying that like a lot of the questions we got were like, oh, our parents were like, oh, we worked hard, like we came all the way here, why can't Black people also be as successful as us? Like, are they not working as hard? But we have to realize that you're not given the same opportunities that we are. We didn't have to face the same struggle and go through the same hardships that you guys had, that your community had to face. And coming here with the model minority myth in the way that we are successful and we came here because of like the Immigration Act 1965, whatever, like we have this mindset knowing that we're successful and we have a place here in society. And so that just kind of further created that divide between the Asian community and the Black community in a way.
Wow.
Is this all illuminating for you?
I think I had no idea. It was honestly like I have one Indian, I won't say what her name is because she'll listen to this and be like, why did you say my name? But she's Indian, and she isn't allowed to date Black men. So she was saying to me that like she has to date Black men in private and she can't bring them home because her family are racist. I was like, what? Seriously? And she's like, yeah, no, I can't, like they would disown me.
That's like prevalent in the Asian community. Like I even think it's like made a joke of in like Bend It Like Beckham, but it's such like, it's crazy that this is even happening now.
But it's interesting because I suppose colorism is the sister of racism. So it's like, because we're black, it's almost like bottom barrel, and then everyone is trying to, even because we obviously have people who bleach in our community,
right?
Because like white is right. Everyone's trying to look whiter. And you know what is mad is, even me as a black person who isn't necessarily privileged in society, I'm still privileged in my blackness because I'm not that black. It's wild, which is just wild. And it's because it's this idea that being lighter makes you beautiful. You know, being lighter is acceptable. It's like, we're brought up in a world that is like almost taught you, if you don't look like this kind of, you know, beautiful European model looking way, then you're not beautiful.
Yeah.
And it is mad. And obviously my friend was saying that you have that there's loads of like Bollywood stars that bleach quite a lot. Right.
If you look at Bollywood, you just see light-skinned women when most of India's darker skin anyway. It's crazy.
I mean, going back to the racism that I was saying that I was facing, I'm South Asian, and I mean, people will find divide in wherever they can. In India, like North India is predominantly fairer skinned and South India is predominantly darker skinned. So like my boyfriend is North Indian, and we get so many comments. My parents themselves were like, you cannot marry a North Indian because you're South Indian. You can't date a North Indian. Like, they're lighter than you, to your own area, your own caste. So yeah, I've been dating him in secret for the past 5 years.
What? Oh,
this is,
it's a struggle that, I mean, we face our own struggles, but it's not like a life or death matter. So yeah, I mean, we can't conflate colorism and racism with systemic racism, because lives are at stake, you know. And I was watching this video the other day about this white woman actually who was explaining how race is like a social construct, and we all came from a black woman, and the reason that we're black is because, like, the reason that she was black was because of like the melanin in her skin, and she was closer to the equator, like all of these things. And she was saying how this is a human rights issue, and this is about the human race, because there is only one race. But in that way, you also have to respect the hardships that each community faces in their own ways because of race. Like, these black people are not given the same opportunities because of the color of their skin. And it's hard for a lot of South Asians to register that, because they've always just been given these amazing opportunities and they haven't faced the same hardships that other people have faced. So it's hard to explain to them something, even though it's right in front of them. It's hard to go back like generations and change their mindset in that way.
Yeah. And I think
about like, sorry, go ahead, Kim.
Go.
I knew I would talk over someone in this. The conversations when it comes to South Asians and Black Lives Matter, we usually muddle it up with colorism and talking about our experiences. And I think especially when we were having our chat beforehand, we wanted to make sure we distinguish between anti-racism and colorism, because they're very different conversations. Like you said, Jackie, colorism is a daughter of racism, but racism is the root. And for us to dismantle it, we have to be actively anti-racist. You know, we can't just talk about, you know, your struggles as with Fair and Lovely. That's not going to solve the fact that there are Black people dying on a daily basis. And that's what a lot of conversations that we've seen have been going wrong. I don't know if you agree with that, Patricia, as well. And Jackie, what are your thoughts on that as well?
Well, you know what it is? I think to be anti-racist is work. And a lot of people don't want to do the work.
Yeah.
Because it's uncomfortable. It's like you have to then address your bias. And the thing is a lot of people don't want to delve that deep. They might not even have the depth to even delve deep in the first place. But I think that also it's very hard for people to understand. I've had a lot of conversations with my white friends over this period, and them, you know, saying, oh, I didn't realize this was bad and blah, blah, blah. And it's been really interesting because my friend was saying to me, like, I didn't even realize like how white my Instagram feed is. Like it never occurred to me that there's no Black people on there. And I'm like, well, because this is just, you've just lived in this bubble your whole life. And it's really weird because I feel like as a Black person, I've never felt like, I've always felt like other. I've got loads of like white friends, but I've always felt other. You know, it's like when you want to go and get like your makeup, it's like, I can't just walk into Sainsbury's and they'll have my shade. Like, it's, you know, I have to like go to Oxford Street or whatever. But they can obviously just rock up in there and get whatever. They don't have to deal with microaggressions and things like that. And they're all like, oh wow, I didn't even realize. One of my friends said to me, love her to bits, but I was like, oh God. She was like, I can't even believe racism still exists.
Yeah.
Like, what a privilege.
Yeah.
What an absolute privilege that you can even say that, you know? It's and the thing is it's difficult. I've lost a friend. I've lost a friend during this period, because there's a lot of white savior complex stuff going on. Loads of white people calling out other white people without addressing their own bias. It's like everybody's racist, but not you.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to point and say so and so is racist. We got to do anti-racist work without actually doing the inwards work. And I think that it's a process. I don't think anyone reads a book, has a go at their racist uncle and goes, well, that's me done. It's lifetime's work. You have to continually challenge your bias. Even me as a Black person, I'm not going to sit there and say, hey, I'm exempt from bias. Of course I'm not.
Yeah.
I have my own, but I have to actively challenge it all the time and tap into why do I think that? Where does that come from? You know, and it's a lot of work. Whether people want to do the work is another thing. But the one thing I will say is that, you know, change is happening, and I'm grateful for that. Whether it's small, it's the fact we can have this conversation, the fact statues are being removed, you know, the fact that you can turn on the TV and they're discussing racism. Yesterday they had is Britain still racist on ITV yesterday. The fact that people are talking about it and Black voices are being able to be heard is amazing. Because the thing is, Black people have been saying this stuff for ages. It's just that no one is listening. That's the difference, you know? So, you know, that's why a lot of Black people are tired, because literally we've been saying this. It's not new. So, you know, when my friends have spoken to me and been like, oh my God, like, wow, I didn't even realize that you actually have to go through this every single day. And I like a lot of Black people, you internalize your trauma. Yeah. Because, you know, it's almost like, okay, so because one of my friends said to me, do you tell your mum and dad? I'm like, no, because my mum and dad are facing it too. So it's like, I'm not going to go and say to them, okay, well, this is what's happened to me today. Well, they can't really help me because they're facing the same thing, you know? So it's like, until people start speaking up, until the system gets dismantled, when we start challenging people, when we start looking at the educational system and how we educate young people, media bias, what people are actually consuming, what children are reading, because racism is taught. No child is born racist. You know, and teachers need to be anti-racist. They might be harsher to a Black kid just because they're Black, not because they're actually the person inside. My skin may be Black, but my character is not of the person you might have had a negative experience with a Black person before. I am not that person, you know. So actually getting teachers to be anti-racist, even when we look at dolls and toys and like Barbies, like, why are they all white with blonde hair? You know, there's a lot of work to be done, but like I said, I'm grateful that this conversation is happening. So
no, thank you. And what we've like shown with this discussion today is like, it's so like multifaceted, there's so much to do. But like, what can we take away from this? Like, how can South Asian people be better allies for Black people? Like, what should we take away from this conversation? I don't know who wants to start this.
I think there's different roles you can play. And I don't think it's right for you to think you can do everything at once. Jackie, when I said I was stalking your Instagram, I really meant it. You said something about, you know, it's all sweet and good if you read a book, but what's the actual work that you're doing? And I think that's like, you know, if you're someone that has the financial means, then, you know, support small businesses, you know, support petitions. If you're someone that's very articulate and knows how to speak to a wider audience, then bloody set up a presentation at work and talk to them about it. Like, I think it's self-reflection. What skills do I have? What do I actually need to combat within? And then how can I use my skill set to affect change? And there's different roles different people can take on, you know, whether you're a protest, whether you're a visionary, come up with interesting ideas to do so.
I completely agree with that. And I think what I've learned from today, but also through my own journey, is that for different people, change looks a little bit different, and that's okay. Like for my mom, taking me to a protest was a huge win. For someone else, it may look a little bit different. And so giving myself grace, but also giving other people grace that, you know, change might be one thing for one person, one thing for another. But I think, you know, the biggest takeaway that I hope people take from this is that it is our own responsibility. Like we cannot turn to, you know, our Black friends to educate us, to teach us, to hold our hand. It is our turn to use whatever privilege that we do have to help them. Like we need to have their back now. It is not their responsibility. It is all of our responsibilities, and it's small changes, big changes, and all the changes in between that we will together get there.
And like, sorry to come in again, little things like if you hear someone say something that's problematic, be like, why did you know, I don't think that's right what you said.
Call it out. I call my mom and dad out all the time. I'm like, you saying that is racist. And they're like, no, it's not. And I'm like, okay, let's break it down. And we do break it down. And at the end, they're like, shit. And I'm like, yeah. I mean, and it's like, they don't know, right? Like they just don't know because their parents used to say that one specific word or, you know, whatever. And it's in the dramas and the Bollywood movies and it's everywhere around them. So they just accept it. And it's our job to change that. And I think that's a great example, Mal, of like a small change. I had a friend who asked for June 19th off. Her company didn't give it to her, and she asked her manager, you know, it's an important day for us and we need to take it off. And her manager was like, who happened to be white, and said, I had no idea. We're going to give the whole company the day off. And that was a small, you know, win, but an important win. And instead they encouraged everyone to read, to learn, to have conversations, to actually go to a protest in LA. So I think, you know, it's the small changes and also the big ones.
That's amazing.
Yeah, don't be afraid of being called the family bitch. I stand by it now. I'm at the table, come sit next to the bitch, you know, she's going to explain to you where you're going wrong. Just own it.
Exactly.
I think it's less about what I look like and how I'm perceived, and more so what am I doing to help someone else, and you're not taking center stage doing so.
And Jackie, you mentioned losing a friend through this process. And I think that's going to happen. But it's for the greater good, right? It's like, it's weighing our pros and our cons, and how good of a friend was that person if, you know, they're going to just up and leave during this time. So I think it's just like, you know, weighing our sacrifices and the benefits, not only for us, but the greater society.
For sure. And I think that as a Black woman, I'm tired of having conversations with people who are committed to misunderstanding me. You know, it's like, my feelings are valid. So if you say something that is ignorant, I have every right to challenge you. And if that makes you uncomfortable, good. But if you're not willing to delve deep into why you said that, then I'm not gonna, like, the days of educating people and doing labor are done. Because you have a friend in Google, go and have a look. You know what I mean? It's like before, you know, you spend I've been educating people since I was 10 years old. I've been educating people on racism. Well, no, you can't say that. And now I'm like, oh no, you know, I'm not going to do that. And, you know, I think I've definitely, you know, when it comes to, like, you know, the term white fragility, where I've spoken about racism and then people get uncomfortable, and then I then have to change the narrative of what I'm saying to make other people feel comfortable. And like, those days are just done. I'm not doing that anymore. This is, you know, we obviously exist physically in these bodies. And, you know, yes, I'm Black, but the point is in spiritually, in a spiritual realm, we are all one race, you know. Thousands of years ago, you know, they decided to have this human classification system to divide us. And just for the fact that, you know, your friend is asking for June 19th off, and the boss is like, it's have the whole day off, everyone have the whole day off. It's so amazing to me, because it's like, this really isn't a Black people problem. This is we should all be able to be whoever we are, because literally, you know, the way people are dying this year is just mad anyway. But like, we literally have one life to live, and that is it. We don't get another chance. Why? We should be able to live freely. And also, I don't know whether racism will die out in our lifetime, but I'm hoping that the next generation will not have to have these conversations, or will not have to face these same struggles, because we should all be able to feel free in the people that in who we are, and just exist. And I'm really grateful to be a millennial. I'm not gonna lie, because we don't take no shit.
So true.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, please do it. Well, I think we could talk about this forever, but I think what we said is so good, and I personally am gonna take some stuff away from this conversation, and like, check myself, sort my shit out, like, you know. So I hope that like we've all sort of like found something from this discussion as well. And I just want to mention as well that there are resources on this. So for example, at South Asians 4, with the number 4 Black Lives, is a really good place to look at like where you can start these conversations with your family, how you can do that. And we also have like a blog on the Asian Women Festival blog as well, which talks you through like step by step how to talk about these things with your South Asian family as well. So if you want to hear more from any of us, you can follow us all on Instagram. So Alina is Alina Iman on Instagram. Mal is _Mal SHK. As I've mentioned before, we've got South Asians 4 Black Lives. You can follow Pratyusha at Pratyusha. Me, you can follow at Brown Girl Kim. And Jackie, you can follow at oh my gosh, it's Jackie. I just want to say like another big thank you, especially to Pratyusha and Jackie for coming on the call and like talking to us, helping these conversations happen and just spitting your wisdom. So thank you so much.
Always. Well, thank you for having me, and also thank you for using your platform to talk about this. It's like amazing for me, honestly. It's amazing to hear that you're even having this conversation. You're giving people resources that they can go and look. It's just amazing, and I'm really grateful to be here, and thank you. I know some people will say, you know, challenging racism is a thankless job, but genuinely thank you for challenging your members of your family and your friends, because that's where the real change begins. You know, it starts with us. We're only in charge of what we do and not what other people do. So if you're continuing to challenge people, then that's amazing. You know, all you can do is all you can do. So I'm really grateful. So yeah, Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really learned a lot, and I think going forward with this, we need to make sure that we keep this going. It's not just one conversation. You need to follow up and amplify Black voices, because they have been talking for a really long time. We just haven't been listening.
Amen.